JJK has the internet going absolutely crazy right now with this massive reveal in chapter 244. We shockingly step away from Okotsu and Kenjaku to check in on the battle between Yuji, Sukuna, and Higuruma that we left off with a few chapters ago. And holy crap, did Gege deliver a banger of a chapter by revealing Yuji's new powers that even left the King of Curses himself completely stunned. If that's not enough, we end this chapter with a domain expansion being used. Tons and tons of exciting stuff to cover in this chapter, so let's get right into it. So if you guys remember, in the previous chapter, we left off on a massive cliffhanger with Okotsu straight up decapitating Kenjaku. But of course, the chapter ends with Kenny looking far from defeated. So normally, fans would be super pissed if we went away from this fight. But I think we got the only thing that fans are anticipating even more than the results of that, which is the battle between Yuji and Sukuna. So I'm sure nobody is mad right now, especially considering what happens in this chapter. The last time we saw Yuji, Higuruma, and Sukuna was fresh off of reincarnating and straight up shredding Kashimo with the same attack he used to kill Gojo. Rest in peace to my boy, by the way. He got hyped up for so long only to get killed off in a dream sequence in like half a chapter. Total buzzkill. I was a big time Kashimo believer, but you know, pour one out for my homie. Anyway, immediately after this, Yuji and Higuruma spring onto the battlefield with Yuji looking like he had transformed somehow. After this chapter was released, we got this cool colored drawing by Gege to further highlight this new transformation. It seems that Yuji had gained like Titan armor or something, with his arm being covered in this like hardened musculature and also some bone, along with the set of claws, which aesthetically look pretty cool. While looking really cool doesn't equal power in this series, so the big question on everyone's mind was, how strong is this new upgrade for Yuji? Well, finally that question is answered in a major way in this chapter. But first, we get hit with a flashback between Yuji and everyone else that's been watching this fight so far. I'm not going to get into a ton of detail here because it involves a lot of like legal jargon, and I know you guys don't care so much about that, but there are a few bits of very valuable information in this flashback that is super important for what's to come later in this chapter. It seems that this flashback meeting is taking place before Gojo gets completely removed from the lower half of his body, and they're planning out who should go out after Kashimo to take on Sukuna while Okotsu's gone. After some of the members of the group make their case for why they aren't that guy and don't want any smoke from Sukuna,
nope.
Of course, our boy Yuji makes it perfectly clear that he's more than willing to take him on himself. However, it's decided that Higuruma should go with him so that he can use his deadly sentencing domain expansion on Sukuna. This way he can put the King of Curses on trial like he did with Yuji, and hopefully use the domain to remove Sukuna's curse technique, and if given the death penalty, get a guaranteed kill with the Executioner Sword. For those of you that don't remember any of these details about Higuruma's domain, deadly sentencing essentially manifests a small courtroom domain surrounded by guillotines where he and his opponent are placed on podiums standing across from each other. This domain does not use a guaranteed hit. Instead, anyone inside is simply forced to follow the rules. Violence is not permitted in the domain, and anyone who tries to engage will be returned to their podium. Inside the courtroom, Higuruma's Shikigami Judgeman floats behind him, who acts as the prosecution. Higuruma's opponent is the defendant, and Judgeman knows everything about everyone inside the domain. Like literally knows every bit of information about anybody inside that domain. Higuruma doesn't receive any information from Judgeman, just the evidence the Shikigami submits for deliberation. The evidence is not conclusive, and the defendant is not told what's inside. While inside the domain, the defendant is put on trial by Judgeman, and the verdict depends solely on the arguments they make to Higuruma. The defendant's goal is pretty much to prove their own innocence, therefore being seen as not guilty and not receiving any penalties. A guilty verdict can result in Judgeman confiscating their ability to control cursed energy. If the defendant is found guilty for a crime like murder or something, they can be sentenced to death, which gives Higuruma the Executioner Sword, which lets him kill anyone that it touches instantly. Long story short, it's a court case going on within a domain expansion, and if you're found guilty, then you're pretty much screwed. Well, all that being said, we learn of some drawbacks that Higuruma's domain has that might make it tough to give Sukuna a death penalty. You'd think a guy that's killed countless people over his lifetime would easily get a death sentence sentence, but it turns out that that's not the case. It turns out that Judgman can't pick a specific crime to put someone on trial for. It simply collects the totality of every crime that person has committed within the parameters of modern Japanese law and picks a single crime at random, meaning that although Sukuna has a ton of kills on his record, he also probably has a much longer laundry list of crimes that include smaller things like destruction of property or something. I mean, every time Sukuna pops out to fight, he's straight up leveling entire buildings that get caught up in the crossfire. So the thing that Higuruma is worried about is that they have a very little chance of Judgman choosing a severe crime to put Sukuna on trial for. Kusakabe actually thinks it's around a 30% chance. So the ideal scenario here would be to put Sukuna on trial for the murders of Shibuya, because he killed a ton of people in just mere seconds that day. And just using that whole Shibuya incident as a way to explain this whole concept, when Sukuna used his domain expansion to completely shred everything within a certain radius, it obviously killed a ton of people, but also it completely destroyed and disintegrated many buildings. So not only could Sukuna be put on trial for the murders that he committed in Shibuya, he can also go on trial for property damage for each little thing that he destroyed with that same domain attack. And this includes buildings, cars, houses, anything that was within the parameters of that domain. So if you can get hit with a case for stealing a bike, just imagine disintegrating like 1,000 bikes within that parameter. Each one of those is a crime you can be put on trial for. Well, what's also really exciting here is that the crimes that Sukuna committed during the Heian era may also be on the table as well. And why this is super exciting in particular is because it could give a perfect opportunity for Gege to go into the long-awaited Heian era flashback, the one that everyone wants to see. If a crime from that time period is picked, then Judgman will show the crime being committed, which will automatically send us into a flashback. Rubbing my hands together with excitement already. Well, regardless, to guarantee that Sukuna gets put on trial for murder to get a death sentence, Yuji offers to be put on trial again for the murders of Shibuya, like he was the first time that he and Higuruma met. By doing this, Yuji can tie in Sukuna as a co-defendant since he was also involved. Sukuna was the one to use the domain expansion that killed everybody, but Yuji was just the vessel that he was in. I know I just spit a ton of legal jargon at you, but I promise it is all very important for what happens next. After all this, we finally cut back to the present battlefield, and of all people, Mei is helping out by distracting Sukuna with some of her crows. Immediately after this, Higuruma smashes the ground between Yuji and Sukuna with his big ass gavel, and this is where Yuji really starts to shine. The rubble that gets scattered all over the air from the gavel's impact, like all the little rocks and stuff, gets punched by Yuji individually mid-air and sends the wave of debris towards Sukuna. Think of it in a similar way to how Toji was quick enough to use rubble mid-air to destroy all of Megumi's rabbits during the anime. Pretty cool anime exclusive moment, and it seems like Gege really liked it too because he's kind of drawing inspiration from it right here. This alone shows the insane increase in speed and reflexes that Yuji has somehow gained. The only reason Toji was able to do what he did was because he was a straight up physical specimen, a superhuman, and it looks like Yuji might be on that level now. What's even better though is that Yuji uses the rubble to sneak up close to Sukuna and delivers a solid blow to his abdomen, which Sukuna blocks. What happens next though almost confirms a major fan theory involving Yuji's new powers that has been going strong for a while now. As the punch connects with Sukuna, we get a close-up of Sukuna's face as he reacts to the punch, and he's drawn in this blurry and distorted manner, signaling that there was more to that punch than meets the eye. Sukuna even tries to take a moment to think about it. What I think is that this all but confirms that Yuji has learned how to manipulate and influence souls. Straight up soul manipulation. Whether that's his curse technique now, we don't know yet, but the fact of the matter is that he seems to have it. This of course would be something that Yuji learned from Yuki Tsukumo's book on the soul that was given to him by Choso in chapter 220, and explains how Yuji was able to swap bodies with Kusakabe somehow a few chapters later. That punch he threw at Sukuna must have impacted his soul directly, leading to additional damage. It's almost like the divergent fist that Yuji developed early on in the series. There's the initial impact from the punch itself, and then a second heavier impact from attacking the soul directly with the same punch. Well, Sukuna gets no time at all to digest this information, because immediately after this, Higuruma uses his freaking domain expansion, and the trial against Sukuna for the murders of Shibuya officially begins. It's likely that Sukuna will be found guilty of his crimes, meaning his cursed energy will be taken away from him. Higuruma also will likely get the Executioner Sword to use on Sukuna. Obviously though, this isn't gonna finish Sukuna off, so I see him shocking them with his brute physical force and speed, and overwhelm them in that way. Think of it like the first war arc in My Hero Academia, where Shigaraki Maki had all his quirks deactivated during the fight, but he was still a handful because of his raw physical strength. Thankfully, that's where Yuji is an expert, because the dude can throw hands, and not many people can throw hands with him. Sukuna is one of those people though, so it's gonna be really cool to see Yuji and Sukuna just straight up throw hands, just good old hand-to-hand combat fighting. Gege's really good at drawing that stuff, so I can't wait to see it. Let me know what you guys think about this chapter in the comments though. I am going to make a video specifically talking about Yuji's new abilities and what they could be, so be on the lookout for that. But in the meantime, make sure to click the video you see on your screen right now to get some more JJK content, and also make sure to subscribe and turn those notifications on because I do pump out the JJK content pretty regularly.